So the last couple of weeks, they've gone out to war. The Ammonites stirred up some dirt and got everybody else in the area riled up to join them against Israel. And Joab went out to fight and split the groups up, ran them all off without hardly any fighting at all. The Ammonites, they ran back into their city of Rabbah, their walled city of Rabbah, which is their capital. And the Arameans suffered the consequences because they were the ones that were hired to keep to fight, and well, Joab eventually just destroyed them. So they ended up suffering consequences and becoming a vassal nation to Israel. And then while all that was going on, David let his eyes wander, and he had a relationship with Bathsheba. Yeah, you missed that last week. That was the fun stuff. Days of our lives last week. And
Has it changed?
no. Yeah, I could name all of it. Maybe I'll do that in the class show. Y'all no, anyway, I'll take care of it. But yeah, she conceives, and he's trying to figure out every possible way to get around that. But eventually, he sends the husband of Bathsheba, named Uriah, out to the battle, to the forefront of the battle, where he's killed. And she conceives, or she gives birth, and we find out Nathan approaches David with a test of integrity and character, which David fails the first time, although he failed, he passes it the second time, and repents. But there's consequences to the action. 7 days after the child is born, and dies, which 8th day is the day. Ooh, Harlan's coming home. So we finally get somebody to join us. Yeah, it's Arlen. There. Hey, Arlen.
Howdy.
Yeah, we can barely hear you, but we hear you there. Your video ain't on, but your audio is. Not that it matters. We don't have to see you.
No, you really don't want to see us.
We're just going over last week's stuff. So.
Okay.
You see how this works from that end now, right?
Yeah.
So the child dies on day 7 after birth, which with day 8 the child would have been given a name. So the child dies names. Well, we pick up today where that story left off, and it doesn't bode well. Although last week we got to see more character of Joab, who was complicit in Uriah's murder. He knew all that was going on, and he allowed it to happen. Of course, Joab, being the commander of the military, he does have the ability to question the commands of his king. So, and he doesn't do that. He's complicit. So let me go ahead and share. Arlen, you're going to see a big screen. I don't know whether you'll see us or not, but you are going to see the big screen. So
Okay, that's good.
I'll on to here, share, and then I'll go to presentation. There we go. Okay. So can you hear me, Arlen?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. So it's all working the way it's supposed to.
Okay.
So we're in 2 Samuel 12, the end of 12, verse 26. And I want y'all to look real quick because you can see the comparison to 1 Chronicles 20 there. Yeah, it's the last third of verse 1 of 1 Chronicles 20. But for 2 Samuel has like 4 verses. So anyway, I go off the Samuel text, the Samuel and Kings. Now Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and took the royal city. Joab sent messengers to David and said, I have fought against Rabbah. Moreover, I have taken the water city. Now then, gather the rest of the people together and encamp against the city and take it, or I myself will take the city and it will be called by my name. So David gathered all the people together and went to Rabbah and fought against it and took it. So Joab, he's been fighting this war for almost a year. It's been long. He's been out fighting with the military long enough that David has committed adultery with Bathsheba. She's conceived, had the child, and died. So he's a little put off because the king typically went out to battle, and David hasn't done this. So he basically sends messengers to David, say, "Hey, if something don't happen quick out here, I'm going to take the city and name it after me." Yeah, the city of Joab. So anyway, he wants David to take his royal duties seriously. On to verse 30. He took the crown of Milcom from his head. The weight of it was a talent of gold. Milcom was the king of the empire. And it was and in it was a precious stone, and it was placed on David's head. He also brought forth the spoil of the city, a very great amount. He brought out the people who were in it and set them to work with saws and iron picks and iron axes, and sent them to the brickworks. Thus he did to all the cities of the Ammonites. Then David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. So David, he goes out, Joab, as soon as David gets to Rabbah, Joab takes the crown, puts it on David's head. So, David gets all the credit for you're seeing David is not all he's cracked up to be. It's not the person we all thought he was. So kind of taking credit for all of Joab's work. But the Ammonites are finally subdued. They started all this over a year ago, and finally they get their comeuppance, I guess. On to 2 Samuel 13. Some time passed. I'm going to say several years. Four years is what's estimated. So between last verse and this verse, 4 years. David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar, and David's son Amnon fell in love with her. Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, but we'll find out later it's a cousin. The son of David's brother Shemaiah. Yeah, so it's a cousin by marriage. And Jonadab was a very crafty man. He said to him, "O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. When your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Let my sister Tamar come and give me something to eat and prepare the food in my sight so that I may see it and eat from her hand.'" So he is in love. Amnon is in love with his brother's sister. So his half sister.
His brother's sister. Why not?
It's his half sister. Absalom is the son of David's wife, Maacah, who herself is the daughter of the king of Geshur. Now that comes into play in a little bit. Amnon is the son of Ahinoam, another of David's wives. So they have the same father but different mothers. And Tamar is Absalom's true. You can come in if you want. Is Absalom's true sister. So
Is that still incest?
Well,
pseudo incest.
Yeah, it was not uncommon to marry within the tribe. It was not uncommon. We'll say it that way. Now, sisters, half brothers, half sisters were a little close. Typically, it was cousins. We saw that with Isaac and such. So he's got this cousin named Jonadab. Y'all know who Eddie Haskell is, right?
Yeah.
Think of Eddie Haskell when you think of Jonadab.
He was very crafty.
Yes. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let my sister Tamar come and bake a couple of cakes in my sight so that I may eat from her hand." So it's all going according to Jonadab, Eddie Haskell's plan. So we've got a sociopath in the making here. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house where he was lying down. She took dough, kneaded it, and made the cakes in his sight and baked the cakes. Then she took the pan and set them out before him, but he refused to eat. Amnon said, "Send out everyone from me." So everyone went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the chamber so that I may eat from your hand. So Tamar took the cake she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon, her brother. But when she brought them near him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, come, lie with me, my sister. She answered him, no, my brother, do not force me. Such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do anything so vile. And that actually goes against Deuteronomy 27:22 about lying with your sibling. However, it's specific to be direct siblings. So they're, like I said, it's not necessarily uncommon, but it is uncommon for this close association to happen. But this is more than just coercion. This is full-fledged rape happening here. And David becomes an unwitting accomplice in
Because he
this.
told Lord.
Right. As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be as one of the scoundrels in Israel. Now, therefore, I beg you, speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. But he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she, he forced her in labor. Now, first she appeals to common law, found in Leviticus 18 and Deuteronomy 22. And then she appeals to their father's consent. You know, if our dad will allow it to happen, then okay. And she's doing this in order to avoid what's about to happen, to no avail. So she's doing her best to avoid it. Verse 15, then Amnon was seized with a very great loathing for her. Indeed, his loathing was even greater than the lust he had felt for her. Remember, he made himself sick in his lust. So Amnon said to her, get out. But she said to him, no, my brother, for this is wrong, and sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me. But he said, put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door after her. Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves. This is how the virgin daughters of the king were clothed in earlier times. I like that little detail. That's kind of neat. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. But Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the long robe that she was wearing. She put her hand on her head and went away, crying aloud as she went. So her final appeal to him after the act has been done is, look, let's get married. You can't send me away. But he got what he wanted, his conquest complete. So the last thing she does is she publicly displays.
Well, she's ruined.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And she appealed to him that this would happen.
Yes.
And so she's following through on kind of a veil of thread, if you will, that this will destroy you too. So this is what she's done. Her brother Absalom, that's her real brother, said to her, has Amnon, your brother, been with you? Be quiet for now, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart. That's not really a nice, but he is, yeah. However, we do find out here shortly that he had a Tamar remained a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. So Absalom takes her. When King David heard of all these things, he became very angry, but he would not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, for he was his firstborn, the heir to the throne. But Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad. So Absalom, he cut off Amnon. For Absalom hated Amnon because he had raped his sister Tamar. So we do have a little bit of a parallel between David and Eli, in that Eli had two evil sons that corrupted the priesthood. Well, David's got two sons that are basically corrupting the royalhood. So anyway, Absalom here consoles his sister, but removes her voice from the equation. In a way, he's put her away from him too. Even though he's brought her into his home, he's taken away her voice.
Now, I noticed you don't have a parallel scripture here.
Chronicles doesn't talk bad about David.
Wow. So this story is not in.
Correct. Chronicles does not talk bad about David.
Rewriting history.
And it was written after the exile. Chronicles was written after the exile. Pretty common. So he couldn't even speak to his brother. He was so mad. After 2 full years, so another 2 years between those two verses, Absalom had sheep shearers at Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim, and that's in the desert out there. And Absalom invited all the king's sons. Absalom came to the king and said, your servant has sheep shearers. Will the king and his servants please go with your servant? I'm gonna stop here for just a moment. Remember back when David had been anointed by Samuel and Saul, Saul didn't know about it, but Saul held a banquet for all, for the sheep shearing harvest, if you will. It was a big deal. And so what's happened is Absalom also has sheep shearers, being the king's son, and David having formerly been a shepherd. Yeah, the same thing is happening here. So there's a big celebration that's being planned for the sheep shearing harvest, if you will. And Absalom's he's in charge of it. So he's inviting everyone. So I'll continue on. Verse 25. The king said to Absalom, "No, my son, let us not all go, or else we will be burdensome to you." He pressed him, but he would not go, but gave him his blessing. And Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us." The king said to him, "Why should he go with you?" But Absalom pressed him until he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Absalom made a feast like a king's feast. Then Absalom commanded his servants, "Watch when Amnon's heart is merry with wine. And when I say to you, strike Amnon and kill him. Do not be afraid. Have I not myself commanded you? Be courageous and valiant." Sound familiar? Okay. So Absalom's evil plot is put into play. So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons rose and each mounted his mule and fled. So yeah, this is happening. I mean, this big banquet. Amnon is killed by Absalom's servants. All the other king's sons, they think a coup is happening. And so they all jump up and run. Jumping on theirs. So while they were on their way, the report came to David that Absalom had killed all the king's sons, and not one of them was left. So a runner who was there, again, they think a coup is happening. A runner has outrun everyone and gone to David. The king rose, tore his garments, lay on the ground, and all his servants who were standing by tore their garments. But Jonadab, remember him, Eddie Haskell, the son of David's brother Shemaiah, said, "Let not my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men, the king's sons. Amnon alone is dead. This has been determined by Absalom from the day Amnon raped his sister Tamar." Eddie Haskell knows about this. He was part of the whole plan. Now, therefore, do not let my lord the king take it to heart, as if all the king's sons were dead, for Amnon alone is dead. So, yeah, the news gets to David that all his sons are dead, but Eddie Haskell, no, just one. You're okay. Yeah, but Absalom fled. When the young man who kept watch looked up, he saw many people coming from the Horonaim road by the side of the mountain. Jonadab said to the king, "See, the king's sons have come, as your servant said." So it is come about. As soon as he had finished speaking, the king's sons arrived, raised their voices, and wept. And the king and all his servants also wept very bitterly. But Absalom fled. Second time we've heard Absalom fled, and went to Talmai, son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. Remember we mentioned that? Absalom is the grandson of the king of Geshur. So he has gone to his grandfather, his mother's dad. David mourned for his son day after day. Absalom, having fled to Geshur, stayed there 3 years. So we have already gone 9 years since the Bathsheba incident. Okay? And the heart of the king went out yearning for Absalom, for that he was now consoled over the death of Amnon.
So when it says David mourned for his son, he's mourning for the dead one.
Well, no, now he's mourning after Absalom, because he's lost his 2 oldest children. He's lost his oldest to death from his second son, and his second son has now run off.
Yeah. Okay.
And he's mourning Absalom now. So
Yeah, but in verse 37, King David mourned for his son every day after Absalom fled, stayed there 3 years, and then he mourns for any long time.
I guess you could interpret it that way. But here it's saying he was now consoled over the death of Amnon. But you could, I mean, does it really matter? I'll say that too to myself. It really doesn't matter. David has lost both his kids. He's mourning. Yeah. 2 Samuel 14. Now Joab, son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's mind was on Absalom. Joab sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman. He said to her, notice she don't have a name. He said to her, pretend to be a mourner, put on mourning garments, do not anoint yourself with oil, but behave like a woman who has been mourning many days for the dead. Go to the king and speak to him as follows. And Joab put the words into her mouth. So Joab has this plan to bring David and Absalom back together. It's been 3 years. He has a wise woman who has lived a similar experience to David, visit him and relate her story. And now this mimics Nathan approaching David about Bathsheba a little bit, although from the lens of grief instead of the lens of guilt. So when the woman of Tekoa came to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and did obeisance and said, help, O king. The king asked her, what is your trouble? She answered, alas, I am a widow. My husband is dead. Your servant, her, had 2 sons. They fought with one another in the field. There was no one to part them. One struck the other and killed him. Now the whole family has risen up against your servant, me. They say, give up the man who struck his brother so that we may kill him for the life of his brother whom we murdered, even if we destroy the heir as well. Thus they would quench my one remaining ember and leave it to my husband, neither name nor remnant on the face of the earth. So David's family wants Absalom to answer for the crime, ignoring the crime of Amnon. David wants to protect his son and apparent heir. And so this woman has a very similar story. She's had 2 kids that have fought each other. One killed the other, and everyone wants justice for the, so.
Cain and Abel.
Right.
Do we know how many sons David had?
I think we number around 13 at some point, but Solomon is not the last, although we know Solomon becomes king, but he's got many sons. Father David. Then the king said to the woman, go to your house and I will give orders concerning you. The woman of Tekoa said to the king, on me be the guilt, my lord the king, my father's house. Let the king and his throne be guiltless. The king said, if anyone says anything to you, bring him to me and he shall never touch you again. Then she said, please may the king keep your Lord and your God in mind, so that the avenger of blood may kill no more and my son not be destroyed. He said, as the Lord lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground. So David here assures her that her remaining son is safe and will continue to be. She exhorts him to follow what the Lord wants rather than what the human wants, though they may at times be the same thing. Then the woman said, please let your servant speak a word to my lord the king. He said, speak. The woman said, why then have you planned such a thing against the people of God? Now she is, so you said that my son will be okay. Why are you allowing everyone else to go attack? And you see what I'm getting at. The woman said, then why have you planned such a thing against the people of God? For in giving this decision, the king convicts himself, inasmuch as the king does not bring his banished one home again. We must all die. We are like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up. But God will not take away alive. He will devise plans so as not to keep an outcast banished forever from his presence. Now I have come to say this to my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid. Your servant thought, I will speak to the king. It will be that the king will perform the request of his servant, for the king will hear and deliver his servant from the hand of the man who would cut both me and my son off from the heritage of God. So she is pleading to his guilt that it's going to lead to something else. Another death. Your servant thought the word of my lord the king will set me at rest, for my lord the king is like the angel of God discerning good and evil. The Lord your God be with you. Then the king answered the woman, do not withhold from me anything I ask you. The woman said, let my lord the king speak. The king said, is the hand of Joab with you in all this? So David's not stupid. The woman answered and said, as surely as you live, my lord the king, one cannot turn right or left from anything that my lord the king said. And yep, you're right, David. You got it right. You figured it out. For it was your servant Joab who commanded me. It is he who put all these words into the mouth of your servant. In order to change the course of affairs, your servant Joab did this. But my Lord has wisdom like the wisdom of the angel of God to know all things that are on the earth. Boy, she's really packing it on, David, ain't she? Then the king said to Joab, very well, I grant this. Go, bring back the young man absent. Joab prostrated himself with his face to the ground and did obeisance and blessed the king. And Joab said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, my lord the king, and that the king has granted the request of his servant. So Joab set off, went to Geshur, and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. the king said, let him go to his own house. He is not coming to my presence. So Absalom went to his own house and did not come into the king's presence. Okay.
Why does Joab do this?
Joab has to deal with David on a daily basis. And over 3 years now, he's had to deal with David mourning Absalom. And he's kind of fed up. Joab has another plan. Okay, we don't hear about it now. I'm telling you, this is just like a soap opera.
At this point, Joab is more like a brother to David than David has ever seen.
Well, because you've got the king and you've got the head of the military, they're with each other all the time. Sorry.
Brothers have to keep each other happy.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so David realizes Absalom will actually be safer at home than out and about, but he still needs to work some things out before he actually sees him. So we're gonna end it here. I know, right? Just opera. Yeah. Opera. So I end with a quote from the wise character of Yoda from Star Wars. Fear is the path to the dark side because fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. That's your precursor to next week.
A Jedi, you will read.
There will be fear, there will be anger, there will be hate, there will be suffering.
Next week on this show,
Right.
kill rest of the family.
Yes. Yeah, the rest of the other brothers, or at least some of them, remember, they saw it all happen. Yeah, they think Amnon, or they think Absalom is out to take over the throne. Well, with Amnon dead, Absalom becomes the apparent heir. Or the heir apparent. And well, they don't want that because they've seen how Absalom has acted now. So with him dead, the third son, who is Abijah, his name is Abijah, and we'll hear about him too. Believe me, he's his own character too. He will become the heir apparent, and Abijah plays a major role with Solomon. Isn't he?
Okay, so these are all half brothers.
Well, they're all brothers, but David had like 6 wives,
Yeah.
and he had multiple children with each. Yeah, some of them are true siblings, yeah, full blood. Others are half blood, mud blood. That's a Harry Potter reference. So, yeah, half bloods. I read a lot.
Too well viewed, maybe.
I'm a nerd. What's that?
I don't know you read his name.
It's because I have said it.
Well, that's.
I mean, rutabaga, you ought to know that. I call her rutabaga because it's I kept calling her by different names, and finally I just said, you know what, I'm gonna go with the old Bill Cosby routine. Whenever his mother just got so mad she couldn't remember her kid's name, she would just, come here, Robert Richard Rutabaga, come here. Oh, but anyway, so any other questions? Harlan, Margie, y'all have any questions or anything?
See you in church.
Okay.
Are you feeling better? I mean, you're feeling okay?
Oh, well, we feel fine. We're just quarantined. We get out of jail next Tuesday.
Okay.
Says he gets out.
Good seeing you.
And you're gonna be at the board meeting
Zoom.
on Zoom? Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Well,
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and close this out.
Bye.
Bye, Miss Shirley.
Bye.